Wait for you to verify.
I wanted just to see how the camera is. To see on the screen.
It's good?
Yes, I can see it on that one.
Okay. Should we start? Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So welcome to week 13 of this Tafsir class. It's been 13 weeks and we are on section 15 right now. And remember, the Qur'an is divided up into 30 parts or 30 juz or ajza. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish the first juz and then we're going to take a break for about 2 weeks. And then we're going to resume the class after with the second juz. So no breaks. No one wants breaks. So because I need to prepare for more classes. So I need the break. Alhamdulillah, it's good. Everyone can. No. So we're not done yet. So there's 16 sections in the first juz. So we'll finish 15 this week. Next week we'll finish 16, and then we'll take a 2-week break, and then we'll resume. And I think when we resume, we're probably going to resume after Isha because the time keeps going back. So then we can start the tafsir after Isha, so it doesn't get around like too early, like 7 o'clock or something like that. Okay. So with that said, let's get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. All right, so we're at verse 122. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya bani Israel, azkuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum. Children of Israel, remember my blessing which I favored you with. So we've seen this verse before in exactly the same wording. But what happens is that it's going to be modified afterwards. We've seen this part too, actually. وَأَنِّي فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. And that I preferred you over the communities, meaning over the other communities that existed at that time. So remember what's happening here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us and telling us that the story of the children of Israel is now ending. And the reason why they were chosen was because of their dedication to Allah, and now the story starts to transition. So it explains to them and it warns them, and it says in verse 123, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ شَيْئًا. Be afraid of a day when no soul can help another at all. So no person is going to be able to help another person. So we've seen this verse as well, this part. وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ وَلَا تَنْفَعُهَا شَفَاعَةٌ وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. And no compensation will be accepted, and no intercession will benefit, and no one will be helped. So if you go back and you remember about almost 100 verses back, we saw almost the exact same verse, but the words have been changed around. What was said there was that no intercession is going to be accepted and no compensation is going to be of help. And now the two words have been switched. So the word adl refers to compensation, meaning, can you buy yourself into Jannah? Can you be like, you know what, I'm going to offer $1 billion to get into paradise? You can't. Can you bail yourself out of Jahannam for $10 billion? You cannot. So no compensation is going to be accepted in any way whatsoever. And can anybody hook you up and protect you? Can't. So it's not going to happen as well. So no one can help you and nothing can help you. And then he says, وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ, and no one's going to be helped in any ways. So what's interesting here is that the story of the children of Israel, of the Bani Israel, it began with these verses. In the beginning, when we transitioned from the story of Adam to the story of the children of Israel, it began with this. And now their story is done. And it ends with this as well. And then it transitions into the story of Prophet Ibrahim. Okay, or I started talking about Prophet Ibrahim. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. Reflect on when Ibrahim was tested by his Lord with some orders or some commands, and he fulfilled all of them. So now Allah is introducing this Prophet Ibrahim. And he's talking about how Ibrahim is very significant. Because if you look at what's going on, using Prophet Ibrahim is a very important thing, particularly here. Because it's been talking about the people of the book. It's been talking about the Jews and the Christians. And what happens is all of them go back, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, they all go back and they trace their spiritual ancestry to Prophet Ibrahim. So now it's going to go and mention Ibrahim. Now, what do we know historically about Ibrahim? We know that he was from, well, we have historical documents which indicate that Ibrahim was from this area known as Chaldea. And Chaldea was basically in the region of Syria, Palestine at the time. If you have to understand that there's ancient Syria or greater Syria or the Levant, and then there's modern day Syria. Ancient Syria was 4 countries today: Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. They make up the old Sham region of greater Syria. So he was from that region. And then later on, he moved to Arabia. So he's a very important figure because technically, if you look at it, we're talking about, the children of Israel and how they claim that their lineage is better and they're the chosen people and they're, better than others and they're going to be protected and they can go straight to paradise and all that stuff. Both of them, right? Both the Arabs as well as the Israelites, they trace their ancestry back to Ibrahim. So now it's going to go basically going one level back and saying, well, wait a minute. You people, the Arabs trace their lineage back to Ismail or Ishmael. The children of Israel trace their lineage back to Isaac or Ishaq. But both of them go back to Prophet Ibrahim. So now it's going to go up to Ibrahim. According to one of the Christian scholars, he tried to date when Prophet Ibrahim lived. Now again, you have to keep this something in mind. The Qur'an doesn't give any timeline for when these prophets lived. All the information that we have about the prophets outside of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran, they're all based on Jewish and Christian sources. So there's some level of probably truth to them, but we also have to take things with a grain of salt. But it's nice to see some of the numbers to kind of give an approximate time where they might have lived based upon what we know a little bit about history, what we know about the empires in which they must have lived around that time. So Prophet Ibrahim is dated somewhere between 2160 BCE to 1985 BCE. BCE means before the Christian era, okay, or before the Common Era. So this is about 2,000 years before Prophet Isa alayhi salam, before Jesus. This is an approximation, of course, but this is what history records seem to indicate to us. So he was there. So what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying? Allah is basically saying, I want you all to reflect on Ibrahim, who he was, and Allah tested him with some things, and he fulfilled all of the commands, meaning he was like a perfect student. He was a straight A student. He did everything that he was supposed to do. So now, what Allah is trying to say is that if this is a true servant of Allah, if he did everything he's supposed to be doing, this should be one of your role models. You should go back and you should look up to him and say, this is somebody that we need to follow. So Allah is going to set up the argument and say, why don't you follow the religion, the true religion of Prophet Ibrahim? Because he was a true servant of Allah. So this is the first thing that's mentioned about Ibrahim. He says, قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. So Allah said, he said, I'm going to make you a role model for all people. Ibrahim was told, I'm going to make you a role model for all the people to come after you. So he's going to be a great example. So Prophet Ibrahim, can you imagine how good, imagine Allah were to tell you something like this. You'd be so happy. You'd be like, SubhanAllah, Allah's going to bless me. He's going to make other people look up to me. Like this is the best thing you could ever hope for. Prophet Ibrahim, he's concerned. Because you have to understand it. If you know the story of Ibrahim, you have to understand his background. What was his background? His background was he came from a family which was worshiping idols. According to historical sources, his father was not only worshiping idols, he was making and selling idols. So, and there was a big issue with his people. They did not want to abandon their idolatry. He got into an argument with the king who said that he's God. And they got in, he's trying to explain to him this is wrong. So Prophet Ibrahim naturally has a concern about family. He's like, look, my family, none of them became Muslim. My father is arguing, my people are arguing, they don't want to understand the truth, they don't want to give up their idolatry. So in the mind of Prophet Ibrahim, because of where he's coming from, he's naturally concerned about this. So what does he ask Allah? Allah just gave him the amazing news. I'm going to make you a role model for everyone. And what's the concern that Prophet Ibrahim has? He said, what about my descendants? Like, what about my family that comes afterwards? Like, are they going to be role models as well? He's so happy. He's like, you're going to make me a role model. I want my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. I want all of them to be role models. This would be the best thing ever. And you know, this is a natural tendency of people. People have a concern for what's going to happen to me afterwards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds and says, said, my promise will not apply to the unjust people, to the immoral people, to bad people. It's not going to apply to those people. So the response was, it's a yes and it's a no. The yes is, the no is, Ibrahim, you're the role model because of what you've done. It's not going to just automatically continue into your bloodline. But then there's a little bit of a yes there too, and saying, you know what? The good people among your followers or among your children and your descendants, we're going to give them the respect and the honor that they deserve. But you're not going to have some perfect family. Your family is not going to be all perfect. And that's a really important thing that Ibrahim is being reminded of. Because today we have this assumption that a righteous person is going to have righteous children and righteous grandchildren. And somehow they're going to be able to automatically ensure that everyone in the family, in the greater family, they're all going to be on the same right path and straight path. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically telling him, says, you know what? You can't even guarantee that. You're the role model for people, but you know what? You can't guarantee what's going to happen with your family. And I'm not going to give you nobody is going to get a special status because of their parents. So when your kids come out, any of your children who are unjust, they're zalimeen, they're not going to get a special status just because you're their dad. And your grandchildren, just because you're their grandfather, they're not going to get a special status just because of what you had done. Because everyone in Islam is responsible for their own deeds. This is a very powerful reminder that number one, just because you're righteous doesn't mean you can for sure guarantee that you're going to have a righteous family. And number two, there's a natural concern that we all have for our family members. Prophet Ibrahim had that concern. He's getting this honor and he's like, what about my family? And he's saying, you know what? No promise when it comes to your family. Because anyone, who does something good, they're going to get something from Allah. But you cannot claim that just because of your family status or reputation. All right, next verse. وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. Reflect on when we made the house a resort for people and a secure place. Now the word bayt, those of you who take my Arabic class last week, big intro to Arabic class, you should know that it means the house. And here, when we're talking about the house and we're talking about Prophet Ibrahim, it means the sacred house. And the sacred house is referring to the Kaaba. So the Kaaba was built by Prophet Ibrahim was built by his son, Prophet Ismail, and the two of them made the Kaaba together. So Allah is now talking about the story of the Kaaba and how the Kaaba was built. He says, remember when we made this sacred house a resort for people. Mathaba means a place where people go and visit. So even until today and in the past, people have been going, and it's almost, the word resort is so interesting. I was looking at what's a good translation for Mathaba, right? And looking at all the different translations, I'm like, you know what, this is perfect. Technically, a visit to Mecca or Medina, like visit to Mecca, when you go for Umrah, the Kaaba is like a resort. You know, when we say resort, we've got going to like a vacation resort like area. When you go there, it's like, it's not just a luxurious resort. It's a spiritual resort. It's somewhere you go there to just really focus and get away from the world. And you're supposed to go and you focus your attention on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worshiping Him. So he says, remember, we made the sacred house a resort for people so they can go there. Wa amna. And it was a secure place because fighting, war was not allowed. In fact, even people were able to take refuge there. People who were, in trouble, people were pursuing them. This was like a safe area. Someone wants to go in there, want to spend the rest of their life over there, no one should touch them. Let's say you have to, let's say you're waiting you wrong somebody, the person's waiting for you outside of Makkah. Okay, they can't mess with you inside of Makkah, but they can wait for you outside. So if you want to leave, then they can get you. But inside, Makkah is safe. It's a place of peace. It's a place of security. Nobody should be causing any problems to anybody. So this is the Kaaba, and this is what happened in Makkah, in the city of Makkah. وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. So we said, meaning Allah saying, we said, make the standing place of Ibrahim a place of prayer. Now what's happening here is that you have the story of Prophet Ibrahim being told. And now all of a sudden, the Quran does this a lot. It switches from one story to another story and then back again. It's very, very common. So what's happening is they're talking about the story of Prophet Ibrahim, and now all of a sudden it switches to the Muslim community. It says, by the way, you Muslims, you guys should be taking the place where Ibrahim stood to pray. You should be praying in that area. That's part of your rights. That's part of the way in which you perform the going around the Kaaba. So when you go so what is Maqam Ibrahim? So actually, Maqam Ibrahim, Maqam means a place where you stand, from the word qama, to stand. So Maqam is the place in which you stand. So Maqam Ibrahim, nowadays, if you go there, you see like this little enclosure. And this enclosure is there, and it looks like it's got a rock in there. It's got 2 footprints, and they say this is where Prophet Ibrahim was standing to build and all of that stuff. And it's kind of adjacent to where the door of the Kaaba is. So this Maqam Ibrahim actually wasn't there. This is a little bit too much history for you, but it actually wasn't there during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. This was actually all the way in the front next to the Kaaba. But it became so crowded, they said, no, we got to move this thing a little bit back. So they just moved it back. So that's not actually, so if you see the Maqam Ibrahim today, and it's like a little monument that's there, that's not actually where it was. It was actually all the way in the front towards the Kaaba. So what is this Maqam Ibrahim? So some people say the Maqam Ibrahim is where Prophet Ibrahim used to stand. They said there was a rock in there where he used to stand on that rock, and he used to build the Kaaba with his son because it was high. So he needs, they didn't have like ladders and stuff like that. So he needs something to stand on so he can make it a little bit higher. So he would stand on this rock. But the Maqam Ibrahim that's being spoken of here in the Quran is the place where Ibrahim used to stand and pray when he was praying at the Kaaba. Because how many people did he have? Today, when you go to the Kaaba, it's full. You just find any spot you can. You're like, I don't care which side of the Kaaba I am. As long as I can make it inside, I'm good. Ibrahim didn't have that crowd of people at the time. So where did he choose to stand? So the same place that he used to stand and pray, which is kind of near the door of the Kaaba, that's known as the Maqam Ibrahim. So what's being said here is to say, take the place of Ibrahim where he used to pray, take that as a place for you to pray as well. And this relates to after you perform the tawaf and you walk around the Kaaba 7 times, this is one way of worshiping Allah. because you make the center point, the Kaaba, the center point of your motion, which means it's the center of your life. This is a way of worshiping Allah. When you're done, you perform 2 extra units of prayer at the Maqam Ibrahim, if you can make it around that area, and everyone tries to get in that area. So this is what this is saying. So it's saying, by the way, you should also take the Maqam of Ibrahim as a place of prayer, showing the honor that Prophet Ibrahim is supposed to be getting here. وَعَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَن طَهِّرَا بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. We made an agreement with Ibrahim and Ismail to purify my house for those who walk around it, those who stay there, and those who bow down and prostrate themselves in prayer. So there's a few things here. So first of all, Allah is saying we made a covenant, we made an agreement. Ibrahim and Ismail, your job is to purify my house. Now there's like a double meaning here. Purify my house for the people who are praying there. What does purify my house mean? It means 1, keep it clean. And number 2, it means keep it pure for my worship only. Right? And this is very significant because if you look at the other verses, I think we've just covered them, right? You look at the verses about what are the Quraysh doing to the Muslims at the time that these verses are being revealed. They're not allowing them to go and perform Umrah. They're not allowing them into Mecca. They have idols inside of the Kaaba. So what's going on here is you have the same command that's being given to Ibrahim thousands of years ago, the same language. It's like Ibrahim was told to purify my house. And now the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he's getting the message, purify the Kaaba. Purified from what? From all these idols. Basically, the Prophet ﷺ, he left Mecca and he moved to Medina, and the Muslims are in Medina right now. And now Allah is giving him the message, you still have a mission, you have a job. Your job is to purify the Kaaba of these idols that are sitting there right now, the same way we told Ibrahim and Ismail to keep the house pure. So if you just read into the connection here, when you look at the historical context, it's really amazing. It's like saying one thing and having a second meaning on the same side. And it's like the Prophet ﷺ is being spoken to directly while the story of Ibrahim is being presented at the same time. So who are these, what are these people doing? So the people who go to the Kaaba, the house needs to be purified for them. And what do? The people who walk around it, so ta'ifin. So people who do tawaf are called ta'ifin. They're the ones who are going and worshiping Allah by walking around the house. Wal-akifin, the people who are performing what's called i'tikaf, like seclusion, or basically staying there. Right? Either means staying in front of the Kaaba, or it means even just staying in the city of Mecca. Because when people would travel, people who don't live in Mecca, what do? When you go and you travel to Mecca, today, maybe some Muslims do a little bit too much shopping, but what you're supposed to be doing, do a little bit of shopping. What you're supposed to be doing when you go to Mecca, it's a religious, spiritual retreat, right? You're supposed to go there, and your job is you go there to cut yourself off from the entire world. So that's like i'tikaf. I'tikaf is you can seclude yourself in a masjid, especially in the month of Ramadan, last 10 nights. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to seclude himself. So you're cutting yourself off from the rest of the world. So here the same wording is used, that there are people who go to Mecca, they pray, but they just stay in Mecca, and they stay near the Kaaba, and for them, that's an act of worship in and of itself. Just being in the area, cutting yourself off from everything else, it's something which brings peace, contentment to your heart, and it's a way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the people who bow and the people who prostrate. So both of these things are ways of worshiping Allah. These are among the most important ways, or among the most important positions in prayer. Bowing, showing humility, and prostrating all the way down, showing yourself your prostration in front of Allah. So this is now talking about the Kaaba and the function of the Kaaba. Now, what's interesting is that this was built by Prophet Ibrahim thousands of years ago. And it is said that the original foundations of the Kaaba were built, but were actually laid down from the time of Prophet Adam. But Prophet Ibrahim was built, he actually built the building itself. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But the Kaaba itself is something that has been venerated. We have historical evidence to show that this is something which was much older than the Prophet Muhammad. This is not something that just, was invented during his time. So one of the earliest references to the Kaaba is by a Greek traveler. His name is Diodorus Siculus. He lived in 100 BCE, and he talks about his journeys and his travels, and he says there's this building inside of Arabia, and this building is revered by all the Arabs, and they go and they travel to it, and he documents all of this. So we even have, documents going back 700 years, which basically gives some explanation of what people saw when they would go around Arabia and what was going on at the Kaaba, which is interesting. It shows you that anyone comes up with a theory, because I've seen some videos and there's some very shoddy scholarship by two academics in the 1980s, 1990s. They wrote this book. It's a ridiculous book. It's called Hagerism. Patricia Cron, Michael Cook. They've made Toba, they've apologized and realized that their PhD thesis and their master's thesis on this was absolute garbage. But they were trying to say that Umar ibn al-Khattab invented the religion of Islam. There was no prophet. There was no city of Mecca. This was all invented. There's no historical document and everything. And this was like a big craze in all the universities. They're like, oh, this is brand new research. They've shown that it didn't exist. Someone recently sent me a video. They're like, this guy has shown and proven that like Mecca or the Kaaba was not in the place where it was supposed to be. And he's got some PhD in front of his name. And they're like, wow, this guy's such a great professor or whatever. This is all nonsense, actually. If you just go and you do proper research and you see, look, there's so much documented historical evidence to show the historicity, meaning that it's historically factual when it comes to the Kaaba, the Prophet Muhammad, all of these things that are basically the foundation of our religion. These people, the reason why I'm telling you this, be wary of sensationalist news, right? Especially in academia. Even if it comes out of a university and say, oh, this new professor from Princeton University just discovered something new about Islam. And they've shown that, the well of Zamzam was actually in Medina or something like that. I can imagine someone coming out with this. And these things get discredited over time. So don't be one of those Muslims who jumps on the bandwagon when it comes to these things. We have very good documented evidence with regards to all of these things, especially even when it comes to the Kaaba. So it's talking about the Kaaba here. Verse 126 is cut off. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ هَذَا بَلَدًا آمِنًا. Reflect on when Ibrahim said, make this a safe city. So it's saying, remember when Prophet Ibrahim, he prayed to Allah and he said, oh Allah, make this city safe. So this was one of the things that that Prophet Ibrahim asked Allah for. I'll take questions at the end, but is it directly relevant to this? What is it? Oh, okay, yeah, it's a good question, actually. So it's saying, Allah said, I've made the city safe. Why is Prophet Ibrahim saying make the city safe? So first, Allah is giving a summary of the story, and now he's getting into the details of saying, this is how it all happened. So it's not in order. Yeah, it exactly happened after. Yeah. So now he's saying, remember when Ibrahim, the conversation that took place, he said, oh Allah, make this a safe city, right? Safe means that make it a place where people can go. They can actually just not worry about being attacked, not worry about being robbed or anything like that. So he's asking for a number of things. So what has happened? Makkah became a safe city in three ways. Number one, it's forbidden to shed any blood there. So you cannot retaliate against anyone. You should not be picking any fights or anything like that. Number two, I'll take it afterwards, inshallah. Number two, you cannot hunt any animals over there. So it becomes safe even for the animals. Not only safe for humans, but safe for the animals. And it makes sense too, because you know what? Allah knew that people are going to come by the millions. Now, can you imagine if Hajj season, everyone's traveling by camel and by their animals and everything? If everyone's hunting, all animals would be extinct. There's just so many people coming to Mecca. If they're all on their way, you're gonna hunt all the animals are gone, right? So it's just not gonna work. So now the animals get sick. And then he said, number 3, you're not even allowed to uproot any plants in Mecca. You cannot even pull out any plants, because if you do, it's going to be destroyed. Mecca will be destroyed. So Mecca is a protected place. And when Prophet Ibrahim made this dua, it became safe for people, safe for animals, and safe for the plants as well. Super safe city. وَرْزُقَ أَهْلَهُ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ مَنْ آمَنَ مِنْهُمْ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. So provide fruit to its people, the ones who believe in Allah and who believe in the next life. So Ibrahim asked for 2 things. Oh Allah, make the city safe, super safe. And number 2, give fruits to its people. The word thamarat. Now, fruits mainly grow in places where it's very, verdant area. It's like good rainfall, good supply of water. There's a river there or something like that. A very prosperous city. Mecca is exactly the opposite of that. Hot, it's dry, you don't have any sources of water outside of a Zamzam well or some small well. Where are fruits going to come from? So Ibrahim is asking, Allah, give them some good food and give them fruit. Fruits was considered to be like a type of luxury. Like in one sense, animals are a type of luxury food, but fruits are another type of luxury food, especially when in areas where they cannot grow, like in Mecca. It's very hard for any fruits to grow in Mecca. Even the dates don't really grow much in Mecca. The dates grow in Medina. It's a different climate. So here, Ibrahim's asking them for these things. And he's saying, who should you give this to? Give the peace and give the fruits to the people who believe in Allah and the people who believe in the next life. So think about, well, why did Prophet Ibrahim specify this? Ibrahim learned his lesson. Remember the previous dua that he made? He asked Allah, I said, oh Allah, are you going to make my descendants also leaders, the way you were going to make me a role model and a leader for people? He said, my promise does not extend to people who are unjust. So he goes, oh man, I should be careful. This time I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm not going to ask for too much that goes above and beyond my, something that I've done. Like I shouldn't have said, what about all of my family? I should have said, what about my righteous family? So he learned his lesson, and now he's asking Allah, oh Allah, give peace and give fruits to the people who believe in you and who are doing good deeds and all of that stuff. So he's being careful, and he learned his lesson, and we should learn our lesson. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond with? قَالَ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَأُمَتِّعُهُ قَلِيلًا ثُمَّ أَضْطَرُّهُ إِلَىٰ عَذَابِ النَّارِ. He said, even for the disbeliever, I will let him enjoy a little bit too. So you know what? The peace is not only for the Muslims, and the fruits are not only for the Muslims. Even non-Muslims are going to get some of those benefits in this life. But I will then drag him to the punishment of the fire. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. A horrible place to be. So when Ibrahim asked for something, Allah said, no, I'm going to be even more merciful, and I'm going to give those people something in this life. And that's why the word, when we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, there's the word Rahman, which means the merciful, the compassionate. And then there's Rahim, the merciful or compassionate. They're almost synonymous. But the scholars say there's one main difference between the word Rahman and the word Rahim. The word Rahman is all-encompassing, and it's vast, it's wide. It applies to everyone in this world. So one way of looking at it is it applies to everyone. Rahim is specific to people who are obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Rahman, everyone gets Allah's mercy at some level. They get to breathe, they get a digestive system, they get a immune system, they get food, they get all sorts of things. Rahim is the special mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows. Another way to look at it is Rahman applies to this dunya, to this world. It's going to allow people to have some level of, despite what they're doing, they're still going to get some stuff in this world. But Rahim applies to the next life. When someone is doing what they're supposed to be doing in this world, Allah is going to show that special mercy on the Day of Judgment to those people who met a certain threshold of believing and doing good deeds that they should have been doing. So this is a really interesting principle, because sometimes people, they look at somebody who's doing something wrong, right? Somebody's oppressive, somebody is arrogant, somebody is cursing Allah. They don't believe in Allah. You say, why did Allah bless them? They have a nice house and they have so much money and they have all these things. What about us? Why are they getting all these things? And this exactly, and Ibrahim was like, you know what, give these things to the people who believe, because he's trying to like make up for what he said before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's response is, no, I'm going to give these things of this world, I'm going to give it even to the people who disbelieve. But don't let them think that just because they're getting all these things, that they're somehow blessed. No, because then they're going to enjoy a little bit in this world, but then they're going to have to suffer later on. So when it comes to this world, everyone's going to get some level of enjoyment. It's not specifically restricted to only one group. So there's a general principle that is being taught to us here. All right, and then I had one more thing to say. No, that's fine. We'll skip that. All right, the next verse. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا. Reflect on when Ibrahim was raising the foundations of the house along with Ismail. And what did they do? They asked, they made a dua and said, our Lord, accept from us. Meaning, accept this effort, accept this work from us that we're dealing with right now. So this is kind of the word qawa'id, the foundations. This is where scholars have said, you know what? There are some historical reports. They're not that strong, but the reports are there that says that the foundation, meaning not the foundation, but like the spot itself was marked out during the time of Prophet Adam. And then Ibrahim came to a spot which was already chosen, and he was building the actual house, the foundations of the house, even though there was a foundational place that was already there. So he was guided to go towards Mecca. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, one of the explanations that scholars give to support this idea. But regardless of whether it was him who built it or whether Adam built it in the first place or established it in the first place, Prophet Ibrahim is told by Allah to build the Kaaba. And now he's recalling the conversation and saying, while Prophet Ibrahim was building, what were they doing? Ibrahim and Ismail and his son, what were they doing? They were making dua, they were calling on Allah. So while they're engaged in work, they're asking Allah, oh Allah, accept this from us, accept this effort that we're doing. And this is an important mentality, right? This is an important principle. Prophet Ibrahim is a prophet. He's got revelation by Allah. Allah told him, you're supposed to build the Kaaba. He didn't just come up with the idea himself. Allah told him, you construct this building in this place. So he went. Now, you can have this mentality and say, well, I'm doing what Allah told me to do. So it must be good. I must be fine. I must be doing the right thing. There's nothing further to do. But that's not what Ibrahim's doing. Ibrahim is doing what Allah told him to do. And at the same time, he's asking Allah to accept what he's doing. It's humility. It's the opposite of arrogance, right? It's like someone who finishes a prayer, says, you know what? I put a lot of effort into my prayer. I'm focused so well. But you're not going to ask Allah, oh Allah, accept this prayer? Say, no. Look at the mentality. Some people's mentality is, oh, Allah must accept my prayer because it was so good. I did such a good job. Like by fasting in Ramadan, I did an amazing job. Why should I? Allah should accept it. It's not about you. You, first of all, you don't know how good your fast was. You don't know how good your prayer was, right? First, second of all, Allah has no obligation on you to do anything, right? So when you're going and you're a servant and He's the Lord, the mentality is different. You ask Allah always have a level of humility. And you say, you know what? Oh Allah, I'm doing this prayer. Oh Allah, I'm making this building. Oh Allah, I'm doing this fasting. But I may have shortcomings in it. Allah, accept this from me with despite my shortcomings. If my intention is good, make my intention good and accept this from me. This is the level of humility that we find with Prophet Ibrahim. Innaka antas sami'ul alim. Only you are the hearing and the knowing. So meaning you are the hearing because we are asking you, oh Allah, accept this from us. And you hear everything. So you hear our dua, you hear our supplication, our prayer. And you are the all-knowing, meaning you know what's in our hearts. You know our intention. You know what we were really trying to do. So accept whatever good intention that we had from, that we had in our hearts to do your work. And then they kept on praying. رَبَّنَا وَجَعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. Our Lord, make us obedient to you. So I just translated it this way. It says, وَجَعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ. Muslimaini, from the word Muslim, can mean either Muslim, like Muslim with the identity marker, capital M, Muslim, or the word Muslim actually means to surrender or to submit or to be obedient. So it could have a verbal meaning or it could have a nounal meaning. Like I'm a Muslim as an identity marker, or I'm engaging in the act of Islam, which means I'm engaging in obedience, I'm engaging in surrender, I'm engaging in submission. And what's interesting is that whenever the word Islam or Muslim is used in the Qur'an, it's not primarily as an identity marker. It's used more in the verbal form, meaning that there's supposed to be action of surrender and submission and obedience, because that's the core of Islam, actually surrendering yourself to Allah. They're saying, oh Allah, make us too obedient to you, but then the word Muslim is still there. So there's an aspect of surrender and obedience, and there's an aspect of using the word Muslim to show what? What religion was Prophet Ibrahim following? What would he have defined himself as? As a Muslim. Why? Because he's surrendering himself, he's obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's saying, make us Muslims to you, make us obedient to you. وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِنَا أُمَّةً مُسْلِمَةً لَكَ. And make our descendants a community that's obedient to you. But technically it's saying, make our community that is a ummatan muslima, a Muslim community, a surrendering community. But then the word Muslim, that's what it means. So it's saying that he's saying, make our descendants to be a Muslim community. Who are the descendants? Arabs and the Israelites. So the children of Israel who named themselves somewhere down the line in history to become Jews, what religion were they following? It was not Judaism. The actual dua, the supplication that Prophet Ibrahim made was, I want my followers, my children who are my followers, they're a Muslim community. So now you find basically that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting this argument here. It's very, very clever, very genius argument. He's saying that you're surrendering yourself to Allah, and the wording that Ibrahim used is exactly the same wording that the word religion of Islam is coming to say. Ummata muslimatan lak. Wa arina manasikana wa tub alayna. And show us our rituals. Rituals meaning, how do we visit this house? So basically Allah said, build a Kaaba. So they built the Kaaba. Now they could be like, okay, well, we built the Kaaba. Now Ibrahim is saying, show us how you want us to worship you at the Kaaba. This is very important to the idea of being Muslim. When you surrender yourself, when you make yourself obedient to Allah, you're not trying to invent something on your own. Today, it's very trendy to invent your own religion, right? It's like to practice religion your way. Right, the way that you feel comfortable. So if someone says, you know what, I want to like stay near my bed, and I want to like hold my hands like this and pray. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to go like this and he used to pray. It's like, yeah, but I'm used to, I want to do this, or I want to do the cross-legged meditation posture. I want to do like, one of these things. I have like this feeling, I just feel more comfortable in this way. Or some people, they say, I want to put my two hands together near my center line. If you're into like martial arts and stuff, you know about this center point. helps me balance myself out. I want to pray like that. Thing is, it's not about how you want to pray. If you're praying to Allah, you should pray the way that Allah wants you to pray. So it's very clear that Prophet Ibrahim, so humble, instead of saying, I'm going to pray to you, O Allah, and I want you to accept the way that I'm praying to you, say, Oh Allah, I don't know how you want me to pray to you. You show me how I'm supposed to pray to you. Arina manasikana. Show us how we're supposed to, what are we supposed to do at this Kaaba? You tell us what we're supposed to do. We want you to explain this to us. وَتُبَ عَلَيْنَا. And forgive us for whatever mistakes that we made. There's an extra calf here, just remove that. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. Only you are the most forgiving and the most merciful. Any mistakes that we've made, oh Allah, forgive us for them. So this is the dua of Prophet Ibrahim continued. And then the last part says, رَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. Said, our Lord, this both of them are praying. Ibrahim and Ismail, they're making this dua. Our Lord, send them a messenger from themselves. So them refers to the people of this place. What is this place? Mecca. Because they built the Kaaba in Mecca. It says, oh Allah, there's going to be people who come and who start living in this area of Mecca and in the surrounding regions. Oh Allah, send these people who live in this area, send them a messenger from themselves. Why is that so significant? Because most prophets, not all of them, but most prophets came directly from the same people of whatever village or whatever town or something like that. Why? Because you can relate to them more. If somebody's from your own people, they speak your language, they have your style, they have everything, it's easier to connect with that person. We talk about this all the time. Say, you know what, some speakers are, more relevant because they understand the culture and they can connect with people. People say this about you, young people all the time. We need someone who can understand the youth and connect with the youth, and this other people, it's hard for them to connect because you're not from amongst those people who have a shared experience, life experience. So there's very few prophets who are not from the people. One of them would be Prophet Lut. Right? Prophet Lut was not from among those people. He went and he was going and preaching to those people, but he was not directly from among them. So Ibrahim is saying, oh Allah, send them a prophet from amongst themselves, meaning from the Arab people. Ibrahim is not from them. Remember, he's from Chaldea. He's from this greater region of Syria. He's not an Arab. He's not in this region, right? So he came, and his grandchildren became Arabized, Mustafa. They adopted the Arabic culture, started dressing like that, they started speaking like that, but they're not originally, part of that race. So he's saying, send them a prophet from among themselves. A direct connection to the prophet that has just come, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is from the lineage of Prophet Ibrahim. What is his function? What is he supposed to do? يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. So his prayer was, send them a prophet, and the prophet has 4 jobs to do. 4 different jobs. Number 1, he's going to recite your revelations to them. If you look at the Prophet Muhammad, his job is, number 1, when the Qur'an comes, he's supposed to recite the Qur'an to people. Number 2, teach them the book. If he teaches them the book, that's different from reciting the Quran. 2 different functions. One of them is giving the actual wording. The second one is teaching them the book, meaning explaining to them what the book is supposed to mean in terms of what these words mean. He's not just the postman who says, here's the Quran, figure it out on your own. No, his job is to teach it, explain it. Wal hikmah, and the wisdom. The wisdom refers to his own supplementary teachings of how to live the Quran in your life, but not directly explaining the wording itself. It's like, this is how you practice it in your life. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and purifies them. And when he purifies them, meaning like serve as a spiritual guide to be an example of what is the best type of conduct that anyone can possibly follow. And when you have that, that shows you, it's not just knowledge. So you have recitation of the Quran, just wording, passing on the wording. Then you have explaining, like tafsir, explaining what these words actually mean. Then you have supplementary explanation, meaning through your own example. This is how I'm going to live my life according to the Quran. This is an example for you. What's hadith, sunnah, all of the things that we read about his life. And number 4, being that spiritual role model and guide in addition to that, on top of that. So 4 functions of a prophet. Innaka antal azizul hakim. Only you are the all-powerful and the all-wise. All-powerful meaning, wallah, you can do this if you want. I'm asking you, send them a prophet from themselves. You're the all-powerful, you can do this. Al-Hakim, you're the all-wise, meaning you know if this is a good request and you know when and who to send. So it's all up to you. This is just my request and my suggestion. I hope you can do something like this. And now the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comes as a response to this supplication. All right, questions? Yes.
Kaaba, you said the foundation was from the Prophet Adam. So like when you were working, and like the whole the earth was filled with water, then what happened to the foundation?
Okay, so in terms of the foundation of the Kaaba being from the time of Prophet Adam, I said some scholars have said that. So we don't know for sure if that's the case, but it might have been the case. Your question is what happened when it came to Prophet Noah? Did his flood somehow reach the foundations or whatever? Even if it did, it's just stone. So it wouldn't affect anything. Okay. Another question, yes. Yeah, so there's still a stone that's there, and they say that this is what the stone that the Prophet Ibrahim used to stand on, but it's still there. We don't know 100% if that's actually the stone, but it might be the actual stone. Yeah. Is Muslim an English word? Yeah. So Muslim is an Arabic word, which means to surrender. And now when we say Muslim in English, right, it's referring back to the Arabic word. So it has 2 meanings. It has either 1, original meaning of somebody who surrenders, or 2, somebody who basically believes in the Quran and believes in the Prophet. That's what it means. Okay.
Question, I know this is kind of general, but then you all heard talk about the Sabians, right? Can you talk a little more about the Sabians and what my knowledge is kind of like the polytheists kind of, and that also
we did cover the Sabians in the previous sessions.
Yeah, but like a little bit more in detail, and like also about the Buddhists that are in time in the Hindus and stuff like that. That is also somewhere
Within Sabians?
Or somewhere in the Quran.
Oh, do the Hindus, okay, so where do the Hindus and the Buddhists and other people fall into the Quran? Like are other religions being covered? Okay, so it doesn't mention any of those religions by name in particular, but it refers to the characteristics which are general across the board. There are some people who don't believe in any God. They don't even believe in a creator. There are some people who worship Allah, but they don't follow a revealed book. That's what Sabians are kind of like probably referring to. When it comes to Buddhists and when it comes to Hindus, in terms of how they had already evolved their religion during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were already in the category of idol worshippers, because you have Hindus having over like 1 million gods, and you have the Buddhists who are supposed to be followers of the Buddha and Gautama, but they had developed a level of idolatry with the statues of Buddha and everything, and how they used it to concentrate. It basically became idolatrous by that time. So the idolatry that's being criticized is already being included in that. Who has not asked the question? Yes. Yes. Yeah, Ibrahim and Ismail. So the question was, when it says make us Muslims, make us submissive to you, it's referring to two people. It was Ibrahim and Ismail both making the dua, so it's referring to the two.
So, we have an indication as well. Message, the core message of Allah, that's basically the same method across all the ways to.
Yes, so the core message of all the prophets is the same across all the prophets going back. And the wording is an indication to that, yes. And that's kind of the point that's being addressed here. And you're going to see next week how Allah develops the argument further to explain, hey, do you guys say that these prophets were Jews or Christians? That's going to go into detail more like that. Okay. Yes. I didn't get the second part of your question. Yeah. Oh, would that apply to them? No, so it doesn't matter if it applies to them, because you're talking about the prayer of Prophet Ibrahim about getting fruits and getting peace, right? So he was asking for fruits and peace specifically to those people who believe in Allah and who believe in the next life. So when you say believe in Allah and believe in the next life, meaning believe in Allah the correct way, and believe in the next life, meaning in the correct way, like you're supposed to be doing the right things. So no, it doesn't apply to anyone who's like today, who is not following the path of Islam correctly. But it wouldn't matter, because Allah said, even if they don't do that, I'm still going to give them fruits in this life. So it really wouldn't matter. But we've seen other verses previously in previous sessions where it says, whoever believes in Allah and believes in the last day and does good deeds, doesn't matter what religion they are, they're going to be fine. But what it means is that they believe correctly, the way that Allah wants them to believe. Okay? Inshallah. We'll leave it at that because we have to make adhan and we have to pray, but I'll take questions afterwards if you guys want. Inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.